Hello, Polygence. My name is Syed Mahmud. I'm a junior in high school and I'm interested in neuroscience and the medical field. Through my Polygence project, I've been trying to answer the question of what is the best stimulant to use in life, to find out which age group will get the most out of which stimulant. Here's a deep dive into stimulants. Let's learn how caffeine boosts performance across ages and know when to be cautious of consumption. Now, let me give you a scenario, right? You have a huge race tomorrow. You want to do well in the race. You've been training a lot, but you just want to know if you have like something extra that you can just make yourself pumped up, but still an ethical way to do it. Here, my answer would be to consume caffeine of any form. It doesn't matter which one it is, but it would be the best option, in my opinion. Now, most people will try this because a lot of athletes do take this, but not all athletes know how much or how when, so how much time before you went to a race. So I want to show you the tools to administer caffeine. Now, caffeine is most widely consumed as a psychoactive substance across the world, with 90% of adults around the world using it daily, which sounds crazy, I know. And it can boost endurance up to 12% in athletes alone. However, in children, this is not advised because this can affect their nightly activities and sleep. So it's very disturbing in that sense. Now, why caffeine? Caffeine is a drug that America, Europe, and nearly every part of the world runs on, whether it be confined to tea, coffee, gels, and capsules of caffeine. And it can be universally uh, taken without an issue from a prescription or permission from a medical or insurance provider. And it can be used not only in endurance sports or productive activities, but can be consumed in the morning without significant drawbacks, and can lead to productivity and increase in the workplace. It is widely used to protect against fatigue and revitalize your energy in the mind and body. However, this does not mean that caffeine comes without drawbacks. Now, how to use caffeine wisely? The ideal dosage I would recommend is 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. And for timing, I would use it nearly an hour to 60 or 55 minutes before exercise. However, for many users, alternative delivery methods include gels, capsules, cakes, soda, and cookies. Now, I personally recommend that tea is the primary option because it has the least drawbacks when compared to the other options. It has a verbal but still delicious taste without being too sweet. And being a diabetic myself, you're going to want to keep away from the sugar. Now, things to look out for when concerning caffeine are the side effects. Now, a few of the side effects include anxiety, where you feel very anxious a lot of the time if you use this drug too much or in very stressful situations. And if you use it too much during the nighttime or even in the evening, you will experience at least some form of insomnia. So that can be a huge factor in whether your development as a child or adolescent is definitely going to be plummeted. And finally, tachycardia, which is huge, huge heart disorder that a lot of people don't know they have, but they might experience some form of it when using too much caffeine. It's all about how much you use, really. Now, other than that, the long-term risks include addiction, withdrawal, and cardiovascular issues, of course. Age-specific concerns are within certainly just children, teens, adolescents, and especially the elderly who might not be able to take the whole energy of the caffeine. Now, caffeine across the ages, I was starting to talk about this. Now, sleep disruption and mood swings and dependence. These are the main factors that kids and teens will experience when they use too much caffeine. In fact, a little bit of caffeine might be a little too much for them because they need their sleep. They go to school, they go to their volunteering, they go to their sports. Sometimes it might be too much. So as a child, I don't recommend giving this to other children. But in adults, you might experience optimal performance. And that's in might, you will, 100%. So this will give you endurance and cognitive benefits. For the elderly, this will definitely cause sleep disturbances, which are already present in many elderly, as well as cardiovascular risks and memory risks, as in Alzheimer's. Now, caffeine is only one of many stimulants. You have the likes of beta-alanine, you have the likes of creatine, you have the likes of anabolic steroids, androgenic steroids. Now, AAS, androgenic and anabolic steroids, are for short-term gains, however, with long-term risks. These long-term risks include heart disease, dependency, and all in all, just less muscle mass and growth at times. Now, beta-alanine is a performance-enhancing drug that can benefit you in some cases, but can also increase nausea and fatigue, which is not something you want to experience. And caffeine is usually the more safer and a more effective option because it's more socially acceptable and has much lower side effects. Now, bottom line of caffeine. Caffeine can alert your attention concentration. It improves your cognitive performance. And caffeine usually is used in sports because it increases your concentration and your ability to keep going. But excessive use can lead to many different things like insomnia, anxiety, something I call the jitters, increased heart rate, headaches, and stomach irritation. Now, what is next for caffeine research? Now, the main thing is we need more studies into individualized dosing. Some people who need a certain level of caffeine will differ from others. This can depend on your sex or age, right? But maybe a bit more rigid. We need a better study on that. And we need to explore alternative delivery methods. Obviously, we have a bunch, as I've mentioned, but it'd probably be more beneficial to have more. Now, the long-term health implications for at-risk groups is that they're not going to be able to sleep as much, right? And which will cause less growth and will lead to memory issues for elderlies, as well as cardiovascular issues. Thank you, Dr. Daphne, for your guidance. You were a big help. Thank you for watching. Questions?
Yes, thank you so much, Sai, and that's a great presentation. As someone who loves coffee, it's so relatable to me. And so now it's time for our audience to ask question, and also our presenters. If you have any question, please feel free to unmute and turn on your video as well. Okay, we have one question. At what age does it start to be okay to drink coffee?
If I were to give you a straight answer, I would say this is affected by your obligations. Now, these obligations can differ. However, if you're in high school, I strongly do not recommend that you drink coffee later in the day. However, you can drink coffee before during the like 6 to 7 range in the morning because that's when you're going to need your most energy, you know? So I would say 16 years old is probably the best age, all right, to start drinking, but do not drink it later than 12, in my opinion. That will make your whole sleep schedule messed up. So I think that's the huge takeaway from that.
Oh, that's good to know.
So,
The next question is, have you researched how much caffeine is safe to consume every day?
yes, actually, that is something I have researched. And the answer to this is if you're trying to not have a fatal dose, you'd have to go just below 400 grams. Because after that, you will assuredly die as a result. Your body cannot handle much more than that. In some individuals, maybe, but even then, it's very fatal. That is my answer to that. So always try to keep it below that amount. That's my answer.
And okay, next question. Did you find any information on doses for pregnant people?
I actually did not find any information on pregnant people. However, my answer to that is try to limit your stimulants when you're pregnant, any kind, because this can technically have an effect on the baby. Even though caffeine is one of the most safe stimulants in the world, this can still be an issue. However, I will need to research more on that.
Yeah, thank you. And then the last question, have you explored naturally occurring sources like herbs or and blends for gender effects as a good option, especially for those seeking holistic approaches or for members of higher risk groups, demographics? Many people refer less intense remedies.
So the first thing I would like to talk about is when you're talking about caffeine as in herbs, I would say green tea or black tea is my favorite option when giving to the elderly, right? However, again, you do not want to give this to them after noon, but you want to give this to them before then to give them some more time in the day to not always just sleep, right? So they can do whatever they want during the day and just feel more alive, I guess. Now, these two options, green tea and black tea, are probably the best herbal options. However, there are some other options that you can probably look into, like Darjeeling tea. Now, these effects are much more gentler. And if you're an adult, this can definitely be a good afternoon snack or drink, I'd say. So this would be a best option for you in that sense. Now, for higher risk groups and demographics, you're gonna want to give them green to black tea, not too much concentration though, because that can definitely have an effect. But as long as you give it a concentrated amount that's not too much, you're fine.
Okay, that's a great answer. Thank you so much, Sai.